So, the other week, I was looking at the listings for my local cinema, looking for a film to watch, and I had already seen Wakanda Forever. I did not want to go see Black Adam, because, have you seen the reviews of that film? And everything else was pretty much a kids' film, so I was almost about to give up until I saw one single screening for a film that I hadn't heard of before. It was called Armageddon Time, and I thought, you know what, why the hell not? Had a look at the cast, had Anne Hathaway, Jeremy Strong, Anthony Hopkins. I was like, alright, come on, whatever this film's about, it's probably going to be half decent with that kind of cast. So yeah, I took a punt on it, and the next day at work I was talking about it, and before long I got dragged into this major discussion about the films of James Gray, the director of Armageddon Time. Now, I had never heard of this guy, but as a lot of film buffs can probably attest, James Gray is one of the most prolific yet overlooked directors working in the industry, and I say this because, as it turns out, the man has no less than 5 films that have gone up for the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. And yeah, I had just somehow not come across any of his films. And if you are in the same boat as me in that regard, then I would highly recommend starting out his filmography with Armageddon Time, because supposedly not only is it one of his better films, but it's also one of my favourite films of 2022. The film itself is packed with themes about American life, but the story is told through the young eyes of its protagonist, Paul Graff, who is a young, sort of secondary school aged kid, and because he's seeing everything through the eyes of a child, none of the film's themes feel overbearing. They are understood in the same way that a child might understand them, and so the film is able to really sort of teeter the line of having its cake and eating it, so to speak, in that it has a lot going on, but it never feels like it loses focus along the way. At the very core of the film, you have the family dynamic that Paul is always contending with. He's constantly fighting with his brother, as anyone who has siblings can attest to, brings up quite a lot of memories. They both fear their father, who a lot of times is quite cold and distant, and worse times he can be quite violent. And at the heart of it all is this matriarch played by Anne Hathaway, who's just keeping the whole thing together. At times it feels as though some of these family scenes have been taken straight out of a documentary. The chemistry between the actors that have been picked to this film is just so palpable that you can't help but just get absorbed into that world that they're trying to create. On top of that, you have a concurrent thread of classism, which gets brought up primarily about halfway through the story as Paul is forced to attend a private school, and pretty much on his first day he bumps into none other than Fred Trump, who is there with his daughter Marianne Trump as part of an alumni visit. And there's a scene in this part of the film where Marianne Trump is delivering a speech to the students there, and it's very thinly veiled about how people should pull themselves up by their bootstraps and how people don't really deserve help to get them to where they need to be. A lot of sort of Reagan era talking points, and that is really interesting because the film takes place around the same time that Ronald Reagan is battling to be elected president, and this is something that could have just been left out of the script completely, but the fact that it's here adds a lot of depth to the time period, and it really gets you into the mindset of what American life was like at this sort of turn away from the 70s. I think the film literally starts in 1980, so it gives you that palpable sense of what's going on a grander scale outside of the family dynamic. But what trumps all of these threads is the film's commentary on racial hatred, not just in America, but worldwide and at different points in history. And it's really well capitalized in the difference of how Paul experiences American life as opposed to that of his classmate Johnny Davis, who, despite the fact that more often than not throughout the film they are going through the same motions, enjoying the same moments together, their experience of those moments and the repercussions thereafter are wildly different. And this is mirrored in Paul's relationship with his granddad, played by Anthony Hopkins, who relays the anti-Semitism that he has had to deal with growing up, and at one point in a very touching scene he explains to Paul about the anti-Semitism that their ancestors dealt with in Eastern Europe before they migrated to America. And that allows the film to have this really interesting contrast between the origins of some of that racial hatred that seeped into American culture and transformed into how we know it today, more in how we see Johnny Davis's experience of American life. These two friendships are at the core of Paul's coming of age story, and it is exactly those friendships that take him beyond the family dynamic and give him a taste of what the real world is all about. And despite everything that I've said up until this point, the film is not overtly bleak. Despite how I felt about the Banshees of Inisherin, Armageddon Time actually has a couple of moments of optimism, where pretty much all of the characters have moments where they show a deeper side of themselves and they show the capacity to not only do better but want to do better. And it does leave you with a feeling of hope by the time the credits roll, and it's just a really incredible film. The way in which it perceives really the human existence, but particularly in how it pertains to the American lifestyle, is just so well realized that it's honestly a triumph on pretty much every level. And if you have an opportunity to see Armageddon Time, then I cannot recommend it enough. And if you have already seen the film, then I would love to know how you felt about it. I'd love to get a discussion going about this film to try and give it more attention that it really deserves, because let's face it, it's probably going to be swept under the rug a bit amongst all of the other blockbusters that are coming out. Like, we've got Avatar on the horizon, and there's God knows what else is coming up really, but Armageddon Time is really just one of those films that I would just love to dive into. So if you've seen it, let me know in the comments below, and if you haven't done so already, why not hit that subscribe button? Really appreciate all your support. And yeah, with that, I hope you've enjoyed this review, and I will see you in the next one.